Hi, welcome to my kitchen. I'm Rick, and this is my first official video that I will be creating a blog for and sharing these videos directly with my friends and family, but also putting them out on a blog of some sort. So, not sure how to exactly do that, but I'll be learning here in the coming weeks. I recently retired after 30 years of working for corporate America, and my retirement date was a few months ago in January. And one of the goals, I have many goals for retirement, travel the world more. My wife and I and my daughter have already traveled extensively throughout the world, and we're looking forward to doing more of that. But also take my cooking to the next level. I've been cooking for many, many years. I did most of the cooking when I was young for my family, and still do. And then also learn how to make bread. The art of bread making is very difficult, and I really want to master that over the coming months. I basically have a few sources for most of my recipes that I cook. I also alter these recipes to my own taste oftentimes, but one of the sources is Cooks Illustrated magazine. I've been a subscriber for many years. I find that their recipes are tested and very true. They come out very, very well. Now, Cooks divides their magazines every 2 months. You get the magazine, and so what I do is every 2 months is what I'm working from. So, for example, here's a stack of the last several years, maybe the last 15 years, and this is March, April of the last 15 years. So that's currently what's on my counter to make recipes that time with the season. So right now we're getting into April, and so the April-May series will be what's primarily looked at for ideas for what to cook this April-May. Their companion magazine is called Cook's Country, which is more comfort food that I make. It also breaks it down into 2-month cycles, and so again, I will be looking to cook a lot of the recipes out of Cook's Country magazine, again, several years worth, as I look for recipes for the next 2 months to feed the family. And another major influence on me and cooking is Ina Garten. I cooked many of her recipes. I also have many of her videos that I buy and learn how to cook. Really good recipes from Ina Garten. I have all of her books. And then 2 more, Bon Appetit magazine, which I find the recipes are really good, rated by people all over the country. And then also Epicurious, and these two recently merged. So you can get a subscription that gives you access to all of the recipes for both of these companies, one subscription now. And finally, again, I mentioned I wanted to make bread. So I have the bread Bible over there on the counter, which is very, very thick, and it's from America's Test Kitchen, which Cooks was affiliated with, about how to make bread. And then I've got this summary version from Cooks on the very best bread recipes. But on the front here, you can see the sourdough bread, and that's really what I'm going to try to master first. My wife really enjoys sourdough, so that's where we're going to start. Okay. And in terms of today's recipe, it's been very rainy and cold here in my area. I'm outside of Sacramento in Granite Bay, California, and I've decided to make a French onion soup, but kick it up a notch. It's a French onion beef noodle soup, which is inspired by a Korean recipe. So that's what we'll be making today, and these videos will be broken down into shorter segments so that I can send them out directly to friends and family. So stay tuned. Okay, welcome back. So I'm going to go over with you the ingredients for today's recipe. Again, today's recipe is a French onion soup, but it's been jumped up a bit with a Korean influence. We're adding beef short ribs and ramen noodles to that recipe. And so I'm going to go over those ingredients with you in just a minute. I mentioned this book earlier in my first segment. This is a huge book on bread. It's very interesting. I'm trying to get through it, but it's called Bread Illustrated. It's from America's Test Kitchen, America's Test Kitchen, I think they still are, I'm not sure, but they always were the test kitchen for all of Cook's Illustrated recipes so that they're mastered and before they ever go out to publication. And so this is everything about bread, and then this is kind of the summary, the Cook's Illustrated summary of the very best bread recipes. So I'm trying to get through this again. I'm trying to master to start with, and I've tried several times, and it's proven difficult. I've had mixed results, but I'm going to continue with it. A sourdough recipe. Okay, so we're going to go over the ingredients for today's French onion beef noodle soup recipe. I have just sent each of you a photograph of all the ingredients. I am one of these cooks that is maybe a little OCD. I prepare all of my ingredients up front, get them all laid out, and make sure I start with the clean kitchen after I've laid out all those ingredients so that everything can be organized and go smoothly. I will also give you guys advice on here and there on some utensils and cookware and stuff that I use that I found over the years is the best of the best in terms of its performance. Okay, so the first thing is we're going to have 2 teaspoons of vegetable oil. And the reason it's not that big of a deal, but I have 2 teaspoons prepared here. But what I really wanted to talk about were these little OXO measuring cups. I have several of them. I use them in every single recipe. They are to measure, obviously, liquid ingredients up to 4 tablespoons, but they are absolutely an essential item, I think, in the kitchen. Very easy to grab and to use, okay? But the recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil, and then 3 pounds of short ribs, which I have here. And I recommend you get prime short rib. It really does taste quite a bit better. But this is English style bone in, and they're about 2 inches in length each, and we're using 3 pounds of short ribs, okay? Good quality kosher salt. I use Morton kosher salt, pretty inexpensive. And then 6 scallions, washed and cleaned. We have 6 scallions here that we will be adding to this recipe. Garlic, 8 cloves, and I haven't peeled them yet completely, just cut them down and they're ready to go, and we'll show you that in a minute. And then a good piece of ginger, fresh ginger. I recommend all ingredients to be purchased fresh the day or 2 before you're going to make the recipe. We're also going to be using some various spices in this. So these are called star anise, these little pods. If you smell them, they smell just like black licorice, okay? But star anise, you're going to use 6 of those. Okay, and then also we're going to put 3 whole cinnamon sticks in there. Again, fresh, just purchased within the last 24 hours. And then also whole cloves, 8 of these little whole cloves. It smells like Thanksgiving every time I use those things. And then we're going to use fresh, we're going to grind them, but we're going to use, I don't know if we're going to grind them or not actually, but we're going to use fresh peppercorn, okay, peppercorns. And again, peppercorns need to be fresh. They do also go bad. I don't know if they ever really go bad, but they really lose their potency. So you do want to use fresh. And then finally, with the spices, we're going to use coriander seed. And again, it smells really good. All your spices should have a very, very strong smell to them if they're fresh, okay? The recipe calls for 1 cup of white wine, but I'm actually going to use a cup. I've decided I'm going to use a cup. This is where I'm starting to change some things. I'm going to use a cup of red wine. This is a Cabernet Sauvignon. It's a good dry red wine, and again, just opened, fresh. It smells really, really good, okay? And I just feel that red wine goes better with meat recipes than white. I'm not really sure why the recipe called for white, but I'm gonna go ahead and use the red, okay? You can use whichever one you want. Again, the recipe does call for white, a dry white. And then finally, I'm gonna use a soy sauce here. Only 1/2 cup on this one, but this really smells amazing. It does call for low sodium soy sauce. but I'm going to use regulars. It actually is not too high in sodium, this particular one, but I'm using the regular one. The one I use is Wanjaesan, which is an organic soy sauce. We go to the Asian market to get this. It's a really, really good quality soy sauce. So if you want to know which one I'm using. And then finally, it's asking for some rice vinegar, 3 tablespoons of rice vinegar. Again, I get it at the Oriental market. I use this one here. Okay. And then it's asking for actually quite a bit, 5 pounds of onions. And these are just basically medium-sized yellow onions. And we're going to use 5 pounds. There's about 10. That means it's about 10 medium onions. This recipe is going to call to put water in it. I'm going to use half water and half bone broth to give it more depth and richness of flavor. You can see here, now this is my own made bone broth. I basically, it takes all day, actually it takes 2 days to make this stuff. I start with bones, veal bones and beef bones, and and it's on the stove for many, many hours, over 20 hours. And then I basically put these into a mold and let it harden. And then I cut them into these squares and I put them in the freezer. And so whenever I need bone broth, I use my own recipe. And it absolutely tastes much better than anything that you can get out of a can. So I'm going to do a combination of water and bone broth. Again, changing the recipe a little bit. You don't have to do that. You can use all water if you wish. But I think that will add a little bit of depth and richness to the recipe. And then finally, I'm going to use 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter. Okay? Okay, there is one more ingredient that I forgot to tell you about, because again, this is French onion beef noodle soup, and I have these freshly made ramen noodles that I pick up at the Oriental market. Okay, the reason I forgot these is I keep them in the refrigerator until I'm ready to use them with some saran wrap over them, but these are fresh made ramen noodles. Okay, going back to, I want to go back to, I mentioned that I'm going to give some advice about different products, equipment, and products like for example, the type of soy sauce or the type of rice vinegar. I had gotten most of those recommendations out of Cook's Illustrated magazine. At the back of each edition, they have an equipment review and a product review, and they go into extensive details as to why they picked the product that they picked. So I highly recommend that you take a look at Cook's. Cook's Illustrated is probably the definitive guide for cooks out there all over the world. It's very thorough, very well written. Okay, so the very next thing that we're going to do now is start to make this recipe by browning our prime beef short ribs. Okay, we'll start with that. Okay, so you're not going to see my face in this portion of the video because I want to show you the cooking board here. Okay, so I've got my 6 2-inch prime short ribs, and I'm going to go ahead and liberally cover them in the coarse salt. So in the meantime, we're also going to be heating up our cooking oil in the pot, and then we're going to basically sear these short ribs. Okay, but first we're going to go ahead and just add our salt, and you can be liberal with this salt. It's coarse. Again, it's coarse salt. I told you earlier I use Morton's, so all sides. Looks like a lot of salt, but we're good. Okay, and then what I will do, and sort of don't waste too much of this salt, is that before I put them into the pot, I will go ahead and take the ends and get the rest of the salt off the board the best I can. I really do not like to waste any food, so I do that. make sure they're liberally salted. We will not be putting pepper on this yet. Most recipes call for you to salt and pepper at the same time, but we're not going to do that on this one, okay? So there they are. So those are nicely salted. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and heat this large Dutch oven up. I'm going to go ahead and coat the bottom of it with that 2 tablespoons of the vegetable oil. Okay, so I take that, coat the bottom of this pot. This is a very large Dutch oven. Again, going back to the recommendations from Cooks Illustrated, I use the French Le Creuset. I have several of them in different sizes, and I find them to be excellent at conducting heat. And of course, you can put them in the oven as well. So we'll go ahead and start that oil heating up, and then we will go ahead and brown these, working in batches. We'll go ahead and brown these short ribs until they're well browned on all sides, okay? Okay, the oil is sufficiently hot, and so now we're gonna start So we'll do it in batches, 3 and then the other 3, so I don't crowd them in here. But the idea here is to go ahead and get them brown on all sides. It will take about 12 to 14 minutes to get them brown. And then as they're brown, I'll go ahead and transfer them to a platter before we start our next step, okay? So again, probably about 3 minutes on each side. So this will take about 12 to 14 minutes per batch. Okay, so here I am browning, give you a better view of this. Starting to put them up on the sides there. So since it's a pretty big pot, I'll go ahead and add the other 3, get those started. I know I just said a few minutes ago not to crowd, but I think this pot's big enough to handle this now that these are up on the side. Okay, we're going to brown it on all sides, and when it's done, it should be nice and brown. And then we're going to transfer them to a platter. Okay, they're coming along nicely. Got these ones up on their sides now. What this browning does is it kind of locks in, if I can keep them up, kind of locks in all the juice in the meat as it's cooking. This is pretty good. Now get these last 2 sides. Now these are up. I'll put those other sides down. And we're almost there. Okay, so these are really getting ready to take out of the pot here. They're pretty much browned on all sides. Looking pretty good. Smelling amazing. Okay. You can see those are all brown. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take them, I'm going to put them onto a dish here, and get that in the picture. And then you'll just let those juices collect right on that dish. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and drain off some of this fat that's in the pot, and we're going to then start to cook our scallion parts, our garlic, and our ginger. And that's what's coming up next. Okay, so I'm going to slice the garlic. You don't have to peel this garlic, but it needs to be a clean piece, and it needs to be washed, which I've already done. And then you're going to slice it. I have one of these slicers for garlic, and it works really, really good. It's extremely sharp. It's made in Italy, and I put one of these cut-proof gloves on just to not cut my hand, okay? And then basically, I'm going to just kind of try to do this fairly thin by setting the dial here, and then just kind of go across. Okay, and this is how I thinly slice my garlic. Keep going back. It does it very, very quickly. Sometimes it gets a little bit gunked up on the other side, so just go ahead and get rid of it and start again. Okay, and so it can be a little bit tricky, but again, you want to definitely have the cut-proof glove on to make no mistakes. Okay, so I'm going to cut that garlic up. quite a bit of it, and we'll finish that up. Okay, as you can see, I've gone ahead and thinly sliced this ginger. You can see all of the brown sides on it because, again, I didn't peel it. It smells really, really good. It's okay though, because at the end of this recipe, the liquid is going to be strained through a very fine mesh strainer, and it will take out a lot of this stuff, okay? So don't have to worry about that. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna separate our scallions, the white part from the green part, okay? These have already been washed. So we just wanna take these, probably about right about there, and just kind of take those parts there and then have those separated. And then I'm just basically going to, part of it's gonna go in now and part of it's gonna go in later at the end, okay? And then finally, the garlic, we're going to go ahead and, peel our garlic. And I'll just go ahead and set this right in there because that's all gonna go in the pot all at the same time. And then we're gonna go ahead and start peeling this garlic. So to peel the garlic, I have this little thing here. I just cut the ends of the garlic off, and then I just simply rub it in there, and boom, out pops the garlic completely clean and ready to go. And we'll do that for the rest of this garlic. Again, very quick, very easy. This one needs a little bit more. Let's try that again. Boom. And then if it doesn't completely come off, it's loose enough to where it'll just fall off around you. Throw that in there. And for this recipe, we're using 8 cloves of garlic. I usually add a couple of extra cloves no matter what they say. I always add a little bit more, and I really like garlic. It's very good for you, and so I always give it a few extra cloves regardless of what the recipe calls for. Okay, so I got rid of most of the excess grease from the short ribs, and so I'm going to basically add now the white portions of the green onions or the scallions, the sliced fresh ginger, and the whole garlic cloves to the pot. And we're gonna basically brown these for about 4 minutes. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop those in there. Okay, drop them all in there. I'll continue to use my tongs for now. Okay, and we'll start a timer for 4 minutes and just kind of brown those for about 4 minutes. Alexa, start a timer for 4 minutes. Okay. Okay, so we're getting down to our 4 minutes here, and the fragrance is really, really great. It smells really good. You can see this is kind of browning here in the pot. In the meantime, I'm starting to heat up my homemade bone broth because that's going to go in this recipe. I'm just going to let that frozen bone broth start to warm up. And then to this, we're going to go ahead and add some of our seasonings now. We're going to add the star anise, again, which is this liquid smelling. We're going to throw that in there, okay? We're also going to add our cinnamon sticks. Just throw them in whole. We're going to add our cloves, again, which is 8 cloves. And again, just a reminder, all your spices should be fresh, okay? And then finally, we're going to add our peppercorns and our coriander seeds, and that's 2 teaspoons each. I'm going to take my fresh peppercorns, just throw them in there, okay? Throw all that in there. And the same thing with the coriander, 2 teaspoons each, okay? Just throw them on in there. And you're going to kind of mix all this stuff up for about a minute. So all you really need is about a minute with this. Okay, so then after about 1 minute, we're going to add the red wine. And again, it smells really aromatic, and so I'm going to go ahead and add this wine. And go ahead and allow the wine, and go ahead and make sure you scrape off anything from the meat that was stuck on the bottom, okay? And you're gonna let this almost completely evaporate that wine. It'll take about 3 minutes. Okay, after about 3 minutes, you can kind of see we've got a lot of the wine that's evaporated. We'll let that go for about another minute, but the smell between the red wine and all the spices and the ginger and the garlic, it really smells amazing. And this is gonna give a real flavor to this soup, this French onion beef noodle soup. And again, this recipe then calls to add water. I'm going to cut the water in half and make half water and half of my homemade bone broth, which is warming up here on the side. Okay, so now that this is about 3 minutes, we've let it go for about 3 minutes. We're going to go ahead and add to it now. Before we do add anything else, we're going to go ahead and return the beef that we set aside, including the beef juices. Okay, so here's our beef again. I'm going to go ahead and just set that down in there. I'm going to put the meaty bone side down. I'm going to turn them around just so they get coated a little bit in this beautiful, really smells great. Take each one and just kind of turn it around in that wine. And then I finally leave it with the bone side down. Doesn't call for that in the recipe, but that's how I usually do it. Works well for me, okay? But there's your beef now in the pot, and I'm just going to pour in whatever accumulated on this plate in terms of juices, blood, whatever blood's there. Just throw it all in. It's just going to taste really good. And then to that, we're going to go ahead and add our soy sauce. And again, this is about half a cup of sauce. It calls from the low sodium, but the sauce that I use is not high sodium. It's not low, it's not high, it's kind of in the middle, and I showed you which one I use. So I'm going to go ahead and pour that now in. Okay. And then we're supposed to add 12 cups of water to this. And again, I'm going to first start by adding 5 cups of water, and then to that 5 cups of my bone broth that's over here heating up. Okay. Okay, so now I'm still kind of letting that evaporate a little bit, but the smell of that soy sauce, as well as all of the spices and the meat, it just smells amazing. So what it wants you to do is now go ahead and add 12 cups of water. I'm going to go ahead and put 5 cups, actually is this 5 or 4? Actually 4 cups, I'm sorry, 4 cups of water to start with. I'm going to pour 4 cups in here. By the way, this is why you need a very, very big Dutch oven, because it has a lot of liquid in here, okay? And it wants us to bring this to a boil. While this is coming to a boil, I'm going to finish. You can see over here, I don't know if the camera can completely see that, but you can see my bone broth is almost completely evaporated here. And we're going to add that to this mix, again, to give it a much, much richer flavor to this recipe. Okay, so we'll go ahead and let this come to a boil. Okay, so you can see this water, this 4 cups of water I put in is boiling. I'm going to go ahead and add, again, my homemade bone broth, beef bone broth, and that's another 4 cups, so it's 4 and 4, a total of 8. This recipe called for a total of 12 cups. So I'm going to add another 4 cups of water to this recipe, bring it back to a boil. Okay, and finally, 4 more cups of water again. Okay, so 4 cups of water, 4 cups of homemade bone broth, and then 4 cups of water again. So a total of 8 cups of water, 4 cups of bone broth. We're going to now let this come to a full boil. And then when it comes to a boil, we're going to partially, we're going to reduce the heat and partially cover the lid and let that simmer for about an hour and a half. Okay, so as you can see, it is boiling again. Everything's been brought to a boil. Clean the sides off there a little bit. Just give it a good stir. It smells amazing. So again, the couple changes I made to this recipe. I used red wine instead of white because I think it goes better with beef. Remember, it needs to be a dry red wine, so I used a Cabernet Sauvignon. And instead of 12 cups of water, I used 8 cups of water and 4 cups of homemade beef bone broth. Okay? but it smells amazing. It's very aromatic. Now that it is boiling, as I mentioned, we're going to go ahead and cover this partially, and we're going to let it simmer for an hour and a half. And I have a little device here, a little sheet. Put it right here, show you. This is a tiny little sheet. You can put that right here on the edge of the pot, that little sheet. You can see it there. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cover this pot now. I'm going to go ahead and turn that down to a simmer, as low as I can get it pretty much. And I'm going to go ahead and put that on. And as you can see, the little sheet here is going to keep that, allowing it to continue to evaporate. That's what we're trying to do, is you're trying to allow a lot of that to evaporate, okay? For an hour and a half. Okay, this recipe is really it calls for everything to be made in one day, but whenever I'm doing like a beef type base soup, I actually always break that recipe into 2 days. And the reason is I want to go ahead and allow this to simmer and evaporate, and then I want to allow it to completely cool. And I put the entire Dutch oven in the refrigerator overnight. Once it's completely cooled, put it in the refrigerator overnight, and I allow that fat to collect on the top. And then I basically skim all that fat off and then continue the recipe. That does 2 things. It reduces the total fat content in this meal, and it also allows that meat to really simmer in that sauce overnight and really lock in and absorb all that flavor, okay? So we're gonna pick this up tomorrow, day 2, where we will start cooking our, we're gonna slice those onions very, very thin. We're gonna cook those onions in a separate Dutch oven. We're gonna cook all those onions and use the rest of the ingredients, and then at last we will put in the rice vinegar, and we will put in the fresh ramen noodles. Okay, I hope you enjoyed part 1 of this French onion beef noodle soup.